oriented development with urbanization. And we'll be looking at the challenges of infrastructure development and ultimately linking it to the Sustainable Development Goals and the current COVID-19 pandemic that has become a global issue at the moment. So I want to welcome everyone across the globe to this webinar. By way of introduction, I'd like to introduce to us the speakers at this webinar. I'm Wale Alade by name, a senior lecturer at the Department of Urban and Regional Planning and the current acting head of the department. The opening remark of this webinar will be taken by Professor Leke Oduwaye, a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Town Planners, and of course is the leader of this cluster that has put this webinar in place. And of course is a former Dean of the Faculty of Environmental Sciences, University of Lagos. Professor Oduwaye, you are welcome. I also want to welcome the representative of the Honorable Commissioner for Transport in Lagos, who is unavoidably absent, but will be represented by Engineer Toriola, who is going to stand in for him. Engineer Toriola is the head of the VIO section, Vehicle Inspection Office of the Lagos State. He will be talking to us immediately after the opening remark by Professor Leke Oduwaye on TOD and the case of Lagos. Also presenting at this webinar is the head of the department of Yaba College of Technology, Urban and Regional Planning Department, Dr. Kola Olaiwola, who will be talking to us on TOD transportation challenges and urbanization. And following his presentation will be Dr. Peter Elias, a senior lecturer from the Department of Geography, Geography, University of Lagos. Dr. Elias will be talking to us on TOD, SDGs, and urbanization. And to close the presentation will be Dr. Desmond Amiegbo, who is the Director of Bus Services at Lamata. Lamata is Lagos Area Transport Lagos Metropolitan Transport Authority. And after all the presentations, we will take our questions and answer session. And I want to put this to all participants and the presenters in particular, that the presentations will be for about 10 minutes to a maximum of 15 minutes. And then the questions will follow. The question will be brief and straight to the point. And of course, we have the opportunity of sending our questions via chat so that it is seen by everybody, and then we will take it one after the other. So I want to invite Professor Leke Oduwaye to please take the opening remark. Professor Oduwaye, you are welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wale Alade. Yeah, the Director, Center for Housing and Sustainable Development, Professor Gbenga Nubi, the Co-Director, Dr. Herbert Lawansin, the Center Manager, Dr. Basirat Oyalowo, and members of the African Urbanization Dynamics Research Clusters, distinguished panelists, the Honorable Commissioner for Transport Lagos State, who is unavoidably absent, and Representative Toriola, Dr. Olaiwola, the current head of the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Yaba College of Technology, Dr. Peter Elias, of the University of Lagos, Department of Geography, Dr. Desmond Amir-Gobo, who is the Director of Bus Services, Lamata, of course, the moderator, Dr. Wale Alade, and the cluster manager, that's the engine room of the cluster group, Dr. Victor Onifade. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to this webinar. This meeting is a stage in a current research we are embarking on, which is funded by ARUA, African Universities Research Organization. The paper, this seminar particularly is on transit-oriented development in Africa. We have done extensive literature on this, with emphasis on TOD and urbanization challenges, TOD and sustainable development, TOD best practices, and in particular the case of Lagos. And we actually laid emphasis on the role of government, investors, and the communities. It is our hope that these stakeholders meeting will further enrich what we have done so that the outcome will be acceptable and practicable to stakeholders. Why TOD? We realize that there is need for in-depth research to be able to make maximum use or to derive maximum benefits from transit-oriented development. One, due to the advantages of optimization of the transit network, increase in property value in areas where we have such development. Then it enhances government revenue generation too, and it improves accessibility and of course workability. Population density and employment opportunity are usually encouraged or facilitated in such locations and agglomeration economies. Then you usually have social mix, varieties of housing. It saves time, money. It improves the quality of the environment because it means if you live around where you work, you don't need to bring out your car, so the emission will be reduced. So it decreases densification at the same time. For all this to really manifest and work out properly, usually have multiple players involved, various agencies of government, property developers, funders, that is people from the financial sector, of course, the community, they are major stakeholders. And at the same time, too, we will need such a development, we need high quality project managers. So distinguished ladies and gentlemen, like I said, we are very optimistic that with the mix of those attending this meeting, our work will further be enriched. At this stage, I want to formally express our appreciation to the research funder, the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, and the host. The host is the Center of Excellence, which is residing at the Center for Housing and Sustainable Development, University of Lagos. And for our information, generally, Arua University consists of about 16 universities in Africa, of which University of Lagos is one, Addis Ababa University, Ethiopia, Makerere University, Uganda, Obafemi Awolowo University, Rhodes University, South Africa, University of Cape Town, University of Ghana, Legon, University of Ibadan, University of Nairobi, among other universities in Africa. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to this meeting. And thank you. God bless.
Thank you very much, Professor Oduaye, for the opening remark. I would like to properly introduce the representative of the Honorable Commissioner of Transport in Lagos State, Engineer Toriola. He is currently the Director of Transport Operations Department, Ministry of Transport, Lagos State. He will be speaking shortly after now. And I also want to introduce one or two other people who are critical to this webinar. And that is Dr. Victor Onifade. He is the cluster manager. And of course, we have two of our young colleagues on the platform who form the communicate team. Ms. Damilola Odekunle, a town planner, and Mr. Richard Onugboje. They are handling the communique with us. So, Engineer Toriola, over to you. In the next 10 to 15 minutes, we want you to talk to us about transit-oriented development and the case of Lagos. Thank you.
Dr. Lade, Engineer Toriola is not online now.
Can we take? Hello, Dr. Lade. Dr. Lade, can we take the next speaker? There might be network issues over there with Engineer Toriola.
You can unmute yourself, Dr. Lade.
Hello, Dr. Lade.
Manager of the site is as muted Engineer Toriola. He needs to unmute him so that we could hear him. The manager of this platform, Sonluwa Shegun, please unmute Engineer Toriola.
Sorry, Dr. Lade, what is the name on this platform?
Yeah, the name is
the name Engineer Toriola is not appearing here.
Okay, iPad. It's appearing as iPad.
Okay. He can unmute himself now.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
Yes, we can, clearly.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the organizer of this program for the opportunity to share Lagos experience in view of the transit-oriented development and urbanization in Africa. On behalf of the Honorable Commissioner, I want to apologize because of the audit assignment he asked me to represent him on this platform and to also share our experience. And also, I want to thank the opening remark done by Professor Leke Oduwaye and other facilitators in the house. Thank you very much. However, when we look at the transit-oriented development and urbanization in Africa and using Lagos as a case study, we all know that Lagos is a mega city. And when you look at the population of Lagos, which is over 22 million plus, and we all know that urbanization comes with modernization, which has challenges. Urbanization has to do with the increasing number of people living in urban area, which results into what? Into fiscal growth of the urban area. And it means there's a shift from rural area to the urban area, which is another way you can define it. And they have to move around. They have to move. How will you be able to do this so that their movement will not be injuring, will not even affect the growth of the state. It is very key. So we have to consider this. And when you look at modernization, we are talking about the use of motor vehicle, auto mobility in terms of individual either having their own transportation system, which also come with safety hazard. We have to consider that even when you talk about disasters for the city, if it's not well managed in terms of industry or industrialization of that particular country or state. So these are the things you have to look. And urban mobility is described as a lifeline of a modern city, a critical economic factor, and a facilitator of a smart and sustainable development. When you look at the 21st century city that deliver efficient and effective, equitable urban mobility solution is required in terms of how do you achieve this by coming out with a lot of innovation, collaborative ecosystem, and approaching you approach it with different strategies to meet city mobility through a safe, secure public transport system, which has to do with the transit urban development, that's why this program is very key to Lagos State. We all know we have a lot of challenge in terms of traffic congestions on Lagos, which affect our development and also people's health. So these are the things you have to consider. But globally, we all know that for Africa to grow, a lot of study have been carried out by United Nations. We started with what's called UN Decade of Action 2011 to 2020. We have our own strategies too. We try to adopt, we call it Nigerian Road Safety Strategy 2014 to 2018. And there's a new one that's 2019 to 2023. But all these things we have tried to adopt, but without having much result. That is why a study has been carried out, and United Nations Sustainable Urban Mobility came up with a 10 principle, and they call it 10 principle of UN Sustainable Urban Mobility. And this, if this can be implemented, it will solve the problem of transit orientation, and it can also reduce the carnage we are facing in terms of traffic congestion. I believe you all know the 10 principle, but I'll just brief the house about the 10 principle. One has to do with developing transit-oriented city, which is the issue of today we are discussing. Talking about planning density and human scale city. The third one has to do optimizing the road network and its use. Encouraging walking and cycling, but most of us don't even walk anymore. You want to come out to pick us from our home, to transport up, from our home, even to our bedroom, we need to walk, but we don't walk. But this has to do with the way we design our road. Now, you have to create a walking and cycling together, because the city is developed for people, not for vehicles. But what we are doing in most part of this country is that we are developing our road for vehicle, not for people. So we have to change the direction and develop our city, our country for what? For people, not for vehicle. So we need to encourage cycling and walking, and we should make it a part of our infrastructure, that when we are constructing road network. Controlling vehicle use, that's why it's also very key that we encourage people to leave their own vehicle and join mass transit. And thank God, Dr. Desmos is here. We have been working on mass transit. So what we are saying is that we have to control our vehicle. That what we are high vehicular vehicle, that if you have more than 3 passengers in a saloon car or 4, you can use certain corridor that make your journey faster, or you go with the BRT buses. So we are trying to control the number of vehicles on the road. We also talk about implementing transit improvement, managing parking is another tools we can use to control traffic in city like Lagos, where we have high volume of vehicles. So you make the parking available, and you also ensure that people don't park indiscriminately on the road by reducing the road width. that causing traffic congestion. Parking is another tools. So you make the parking available, but when the cost is high, you drop your vehicle at home, you go with mass transit. So parking is another tools, which is part of the sustainable principle. Talk about the clean vehicle in terms of pollution, our environment. We could talk about climate change. These are what against the climate change, reduction in the ozone layer. Talk about communicating system, intelligent transport system, which can use. Approaching the challenges comprehensively, look at it everywhere. Talk about other modes. You don't have to leave it to only road transportation alone. Look at water, look at trade, which I'm going to discuss. So, however, Lagos State government has been doing a lot because we have seen that there is a sustainable gap between the number of people using public transport in the city and available public transport system we have in Lagos. And this gap is as a result of the following, which we have talked about: the urbanization, increase in the urban population of Lagos. A lot of people are coming to Lagos State every day. From our statistic, we have a statistic about 24,000 plus is coming to Lagos every day to stay. So the population is increasing every day. So that's a challenge. Excess number of private vehicles on the road is a challenge. So when you have a city that is fixed with the landmarks, because Lagos State is not expanding in terms of landmarks. Lagos is the smallest state in Nigeria, but it has the highest population. So you have to look at it, and people have to move because our transportation system is not where we expect it to be. So a lot of people some people believe that even the cost of running a private vehicle is better than going through a mass transit. So a lot of people believe that it's better for them to have their own vehicle. These are also causing it. Talk about a lack of sustainable and effective public transport. These are challenges we are talking about. Talk about urban mobility challenges. People coming, which I've talked about when I was mentioning the UN 10% principle. Ineffective relationship between the transporter and ineffective relationship between the transportation and land use planning. When you look at Lagos, for example, when you can see our traffic has a pattern. Every day, people move from mainland to island. And when that is in the morning, when they are in the evening, the pattern change. So we need to reorganize our land use planning. We need to look into that because so that we can also have accommodations. But in that area, the let executive live outside the island. Let's have high-rise building that can accommodate workers. So the workers, because the workers are moving there, but the executive living on the island. How many of the executives do you have the island? They are very small, but most population, the highest number of people who move to island. So let us change our land use pattern in view of what we are talking about. So lack of parking system, which I have mentioned, is also another issue. Absence of long-term and sustainable planning for transport system in the Lagos State. That is why I'm going to share more light on some of the things we have done to address some of these challenges I have mentioned. So, however, this administration this present government has taken transportation as one of the key agenda of this administration. But when you look about the team, Lagos State, we have a team. The first T has to do with effective traffic management and what? Transportation. That shows the point of transportation in a city, in a country, or in a state like Lagos, when we have high population. So we have been, what the Lagos State government have been doing to now look at the urban planning and motorization. We are looking at deployment of high capacity buses. Like I said, Mr. Delton is there to talk about that. Investment in other mode of transportation. Talk about the water now. Lagos State government is increasing number of jetties we have, number of routes on waterways. We are also investing in the rail. We are talking about the Blue Rail now, which is almost completed. We are also working with the federal government to what? To even do our own red line. We are going to share corridor with Nigerian Railway Corporation. They are also doing their own. So we want to relieve the road by looking at other mode of transportation. We are also introducing what we call first and last mile transport system, mobility, so that when people leave their home, they'll be able to get from the transport up to their final destination. There will be a sustainable bus system, not Okada. You know, Lagos State government has banned Okada in some local government, and SCDA. But now it's even total ban in view of this COVID, because COVID is another problem we have to look at, because transition is very key. It's a high risk in time of COVID, because COVID has come to stay. We have a guideline which Lagos State was even the first to come up with a guideline for us when talk about the reopening of the state. So we came up with a guideline that will be able to take care of our people, of the citizens, of not spreading the COVID pandemic in the state. So we also came up with a lot of guidelines concerning that. Like I also said, Lagos State government is also working on improving the road network so that you can link all these roads together. You don't have to go far. So these are some of the issues, some of the intervention the government has been working on to ensure we have effective transit-oriented programming or system in the state. We talk about even introduction of the intelligent transport system for data capturing and planning for effective traffic management in the state, which is also very critical. We're also introducing the bicycle lane. When you go to Wema Road along Ogba, Lagos State government started with that, and Lamata is there, which they developed that corridor to also start putting the bicycle lane for people to use as a way of encouraging walking, which also improve our health system. So these are some of the programs we have put in place. But however, I need to now mention intervention in specific in Lagos State. Like I mentioned, we have established Lamata. Lamata is there, who is also handling the BRT corridor for us, mass transit, so that people can live. We are shifting from car-oriented to bus-oriented to mass transit now. So we have about 3 corridors now, which we have developed in Lagos. It's all about from Ikorodu to K2 to Racecourse to CBS. That is one. We also have from Yaba to Oyigbo. We have from Oshodi to Abule Egba. We also have that. So we have developed those corridors to encourage mass transit so that we can reduce the number of vehicles on that axis. So we have done that. Like I mentioned, the rain is also there. I mentioned about the blue rain, which is from CMS to Gomaiko. We are also working there. Like I mentioned, we are working with Nigeria Railway Corporation to also create our own red line corridor on that axis so that we can relieve the road. I will talk about, we have also developed what's called non-motorization of non-motorized transport policy in Lagos State. Like I said, walking using the use of bicycle is another mode. I need to say this, that I've said it there, that we are also encouraging private sector to come into our water system. We have done a lot. Government has done a lot of the time of creating jetties, a lot of jetties now, corridors, and even government has even through his own agency called LAC Ferry, Lagos State Ferry Service, to also increase the number of boats they have. And the government is also looking at ways to even assist the operators of water transportation operators to also encourage them to be able to facilitate procurement of boats for them to be able to use, so that you can increase the number of boats on that water corridor. These are some of the things we have done. Also, I need to also mention this, that in time of enforcement, because we have observed that even our traffic enforcement agencies also contribute to traffic congestions on the road. So what we have done now is to now use technology to do the enforcement. Our VIS those days, they stop vehicle, but now we have introduced what's called AMPR. AMPR means automatic number plate recognition to capture the traffic offenders. We have also done that. And we have also done a lot of junction improvements in Lagos State, like Allen, Maryland, Ikotun, Lekki Corridor. We have done that. We even came up with a transport policy to be able to guide the state. We have come up with a parking policy and establishment of state parking authority. Even the truck terminal because our part is another issue. So government has come up with a design to build a what's called truck terminal that can 5,000 trucks. Yes, but I need to cap it up that in view of this COVID, we came up with a guideline that within the intra-city transport system, you cannot carry more than 60%. For interstate,
Thank you very much, Engineer Toriola. Your time is up. Just a few seconds, just round up in the next few seconds.
Okay, I want to thank you. But what you see, you have to look at the financial and cost of all this infrastructure. That's why Lagos State has been hammering up having a special status for Lagos State. The resources we have cannot offset the amount of infrastructure we need to put in place. That is why Lagos State believe that Lagos State, federal government should give Lagos State a special status by giving us a percentage of whatever comes out of Lagos, and also encourage private sector to come in to develop this infrastructure so you can run what called PPP. So I want to
thank you so much. We appreciate you for your presentation. Thank you, Engineer Toriola, for your presentation. You spoke about transit-oriented development in the case of Lagos and urbanization, the case of Lagos, and of course, you touched on 10 principles of sustainable mobility and spoke about what the Lagos State government has done to improve mobility and safety. We appreciate you so much. So questions to Engineer Toriola should be asked when all presentations are done. And at this time, I want to welcome Dr. Kola Olaiwola to please take his presentation. He will be talking to us on TOD, transportation challenges and urbanization. Dr. Olaiwola, you have the floor. Dr. Olaiwola, you have the floor, sir.
If you are hearing,
okay, sir.
If you are
hearing, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'm supposed to talk on the challenges of transportation and urbanization, the role of government, investors, and communities. Taking from where the last speaker stopped, the issue of population concentration in the urban centers, especially Lagos, for example, is not a new thing. And it's a big issue that is even causing a lot of challenges to urban dwellers and equally changing the way we operate things, especially this time around that we have the COVID-19 pandemic going on. Having said that, transport generally is reversed to the movement of people, goods, and services, and provision of access to different activities that are located in different areas. Given this background, there are different modes of transportation that can assist us to get to these destinations. Most especially, we have road-based, which is the most dominant. Lagos, for instance, is blessed with water, which is another mode. And we have the rail system, as mentioned by Engineer Toriola, which are some of the efforts of Lagos State in this direction. There are other modes that affect or that assisted us or that will assist us in movement of items like pipelines, and other, like, aside pipeline, we have other things like air transport, but which are not the common one that we use within the urban area. So you could have the cable. The next one we have to look at has to do with the issue of definition of what is urbanization. Urbanization basically has to do with the concentration of population in the urban center, or the movement from, or a shift from rural to urban setting. shift generally could be due to push or pull factors. Some of the push factors has to do with the the neglect of the rural area. Neglect in terms of provision of basic amenities of life, good health facilities, good road, good education infrastructure, and every other thing that make life comfortable for rural dwellers. Since these things are lacking in the rural area, people shift to the urban sector to enjoy those amenities. These are the push factor from the rural, which indirectly is a pull factor, on the other hand, from the urban center. Often failed on our own part as people or as government to provide these amenities in the rural area, which are directly available in the urban center. People tend to concentrate there, and that is the process of urbanization. Lagos, for instance, currently is expected to have gone beyond 20 million population. And if Lagos is above 20 million population, the facilities are not there to take care of these people, then there is this need for us to have effect of provision of adequate strategic plan in ensuring that we have efficient and safe amenities. So with urbanization, having dealt with this issue, there are the need for us to have the factor of the multiple challenges of traffic congestion, poor management of transportation, socioeconomic and environmental challenges with constant and powerful attraction with the use of private cars. Then we need to look at what is the role of government, what is the role of investors, and what is the role of the community itself when it comes to issue of urbanization and transportation challenges. First of all, as mentioned earlier, the major role of government has to do with policy formulation and implementations of these policies, as well as time-to-time evaluation of the policy to see where the policy is working well or where there's need for adjustment. Consequently, there is a need to ensure adequate and efficiency of transportation systems so that people can be safe at every point in time. Lagos State government from the existing effort have adopted the concept of mixed use in some area in Lagos, particularly in the islands. Then they equally make use of the idea of mass transit in moving people at large as another strategies to deal with some of the challenges of transportation in the urban center. Then there is effort in terms of PPP, private public partnership policy experiences, where private individuals as well as investors are brought into the idea of transportation development in the state. Then, with this, there is a need for government to actually tackle the challenges of urbanization using different strategies like road pricing, physical restraint on the use of private car by encouraging the use of mass transit and BRT system, and other parking charges and the rest of them. As for the investors, they have a lot of role to play when it comes to issue of investing in projects or investment that can bring return to them. This they do through the collaborative effort, and sometimes they use franchising to invest in infrastructure or in urban areas. Then there's a need for curbing this public wastage that may result from the idea of public investment. Consequently, the investor tries to move away from the idea of this waste by ensuring every kobo spent on investment is well accounted for and ensure efficiency of use. Given the effort of the private investor in different spheres in Lagos, most especially the interest of investors in the area of provision of BRT, construction of Ekpe, Lagos corridor, bus toll, the Korodu axis, the CMS infrastructure, terminal facilities. All these are some of the efforts of the investors in this direction. Then we have the issue of the community themselves. What do community have to do when it comes to challenges of transportation? First thing they need to do is to ensure that they participate. And how do they participate? They put them together into groups to criticize and see the best way most of these projects can benefit their communities. They also provide leadership and management advocacy schemes. They manage transport infrastructure services as well and ensure that these infrastructure provided are not destroyed or made useless. Then they equally do the partnership and maintenance and sharing of information. We all know that information is critical. And since they are the end users, they tend to provide information that can assist government in the area of infrastructure provision. Then they are involved in implementation of these projects. It is very good to have the participants themselves being the one to be involved in the idea of project implementation, because they know exactly where the problems lies and they will be able to advise appropriately. Sometimes they bring in a lot of innovation in this area so that eventually government and the people can benefit from their wealth of experience, since they are the ones that actually enjoy these resources and facilities, and at the same time, they will be able to advise appropriately. Having said this, the idea put together, one can recommend the following: that there's need for government to put in a comprehensive multimodal integrated transportation program that could integrate the idea of land use and ensure functional operation of planning activities. Then government must be able to ensure that there's a regular and continuous transportation planning that can gather adequate data in form of how many people are to be moved, what is the resources that is available, what are the infrastructure needs required in terms of transport infrastructures this time around, provision of bus stops, provision of good road and maintenance of this road. All of these are some of the things that government needs to put in place at every point in time. We cannot overemphasize the need for coordinated effort using effective communication and analysis of opinions of people, investors, members of the public, as well as government activities in terms of transportation policy. All of these will snowball into the idea of when the projects are to be put in place, there's a need for us to have project sign-off, whereby this project will be critically examined in line with overall master plan of the state. Every project, be it transportation, be it housing, be it health in that sector, all of them must be carefully integrated into the overall master plan of the state. Otherwise, there will be a conflict of interest and a conflict of ideas, and achievement of the goal of the government may not be realizable in this wise. Furthermore, there's need to encourage public participation. As I've said earlier, that PPP idea or option has been working in the state with the level of interaction between the public and the private investors. Lagos State government has done this practically well when it invited the road unions who invested heavily in terms of management of buses in addition to the BRT. This, we can see that there is division of labor. While the government provide an enabling environment, provide the necessary infrastructure, the private sector or investor are able to participate by providing the rolling stocks and ensure that they maintain them from time to time. That is where the idea of PPP will work very well for Lagos State.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olaiwola. You need to round up at the moment, at this time, please.
Okay, just 1 minute.
1 more minute.
Okay. Political support must be there to be able to ensure that whatever is the project, one is able to achieve it. For integrated transportation and infrastructure provision. In addition, the parking control must be strengthened. There's need for improved urban land use and revitalization and expansion of public transport to ensure that everybody is well moved. Provision of infrastructure and maintenance of the existing one must be a forefront of the government's effort. There's a need to facilitate funding, which is key in terms of infrastructure provision when it comes to transportation matter in Lagos State. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olaiwola, for your presentation, looking at the challenges of transportation and urbanization and what exactly could be done. It was quite an eye-opening, and I'm sure that we have our questions ready that will be taken after the final presenter. So I want to invite the third presenter, Dr. Elias, who will be talking to us on TOD, SDG, and urbanization. Dr. Elias, over to you, please.
Thank you, the moderator and everybody listening this afternoon. Can I request the engineer to allow me to share my screen?
You can go ahead.
Okay. Yes, so I am contributing to this webinar by looking at the connection between urbanization, TOD, and the SDGs. A lot has been said about TOD as well as urbanization. And I think at this point, we need to see how these three elements of the city interconnect. Urbanization is very much a very dynamic phenomenon. And that is why when we are thinking about development around transport hubs, transport nodes, there's need to think about how the people who primarily the city belong to are being considered. And of course, the global community have come up with measuring yardstick for us to be able to calibrate development in terms of SDGs. As we are all aware, we have 17 of them, but in this presentation, I'll be looking at those ones that are very critical in terms of their connection with transit-oriented development and urbanization. So, excuse me. So this is what I'm going to speak to in my presentation. As you can see, looking at how urbanization is happening and the focus on transit-oriented development, we have been able to identify 4 important sustainable development goals, which connects with how to achieve the goal of transit-oriented development. One is goal number 1. As you all know, transportation is at the center of economic development. And so if we are thinking of eradicating poverty, then we need to see how our transit-oriented development can help us in achieving that. And of course, too, why are we talking about the various activities around transport hubs? It is because of the opportunity that are embedded in that process in terms of being able to provide jobs and also driving economic growth. And that's why we also are considering how intricately linked TOD is with Sustainable Development Goal 8, which speak to making effort to ensuring that we provide decent jobs or work and also economic growth. And of course, whether I'm talking about urbanization or transit-oriented development, the focus is on the cities. And we know that goal number 11 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals focuses on making cities safe, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. And that should be the priority or one of the priorities of TOD. All of these activities ultimately affect the environment. And that's why we cannot but talk about goal number 13, which is on climate action. So how does the SDG 1, how important is it when we are considering transit-oriented development? Presently, more than 700 million, or about 10% of world population, live on less than 1.90 USD per day. And that is a very big issue that we need to consider when we are developing our transportation to address poverty reduction. Already, we know that the level of poverty is becoming extreme in most African countries, and Nigeria inclusive. And unfortunately, we have statistics that show that 4 billion people do not presently benefit from any social security, and that means that they are going to be more and more confronted with extreme poverty, and that's compels us to think of how do we create careers and jobs. And that is why it is TOD must be deliberately operationalized to be linked with Sustainable Development Goal 8, which talks about decent work and economic growth. Already in 2019, more than 212 million people were estimated to be out of job. Think about this period of COVID-19, where a number of people are already affected by the global pandemic. So we need to think of the kind of developments that we'll be doing around transport hubs, transport nodes, that will not make more and more people to join this growing number of the unemployed. So to achieve decent work and economic growth, the world is looking at creating additional 600 million jobs by 2030. So as I'm happy that top officials of the Lagos State government are here, like the Ministry of Transport Director and my friend and colleague from Lamata, who are interested in TOD. They have to think about how do we make our TODs in Lagos to address job creation so that we can take care of this potential prospect of creating jobs for the teeming population in in the Lagos State. Now, cities are the engine of wealth creation. Cities are the engine of prosperity. And if we are considering a very purposeful transit-oriented development, then we have to think about how do we make it to address sustainable cities and communities in terms of making our cities safe, making our cities inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. By 2050, we are told 2/3 of humanity will live in cities. Already my colleague from Yaba Tech has said so much about urbanization, its features, as well as challenges. And that means that by 2050, 6.5 billion people will be living in cities. So how do we address that? Using transit-oriented development, because as we speak, we have estimated 828 million people who are living in slums. And why are they in slums? Of course, because they do not have opportunities to access decent homes. And how can they access decent homes without accessing decent jobs? So these are all interwoven. And that's why as Lagos State is embarking on aggressive infrastructure development around transport nodes, we should think about this poorest of the poor in our various communities, in our various cities, so that we do not contribute to the great number of the unemployed due to the type of policies or the type of urban planning that we're doing around the transport nodes. Of course, like I mentioned before, when we look at all these challenges, either from development practices, development plans and policies, in the context of COVID-19, they become more challenging for us, with over 90% of COVID cases happening in urban areas. So that's why we need to think about the interconnection between TOD, urbanization, as well as SDGs, so that we do not end up creating more problems for Lagos while we're trying to develop the transit-oriented, develop our transport hubs, but we'll make sure that the development happen in a very sustainable, inclusive, and safe manner. I spoke earlier on that we consider the importance of the environment, because transport plays a key role in the quality of our environment, whether in terms of air pollution or in terms of the gases being emitted from transportation and all that, particularly where we are having a lot of congestion. So how do we ensure that our transit development does not further jeopardize our fragile environments, our fragile ecosystem, our fragile biodiversity? All of this we must consider in our thinking, in our planning, in our design around the transport hubs. We have statistics that tell us that between 1800 and 2012, average global temperature increased by 0.085 degrees Celsius. And that's why we have issues of global warming, we have issues of ice melting, we have issues of sea level rise, and of course here in Lagos, flooding, which have become almost a recurring decimal, with a number of our communities, neighborhoods being under the water each time rain falls. So as we plant urban infrastructure, as we plant transit infrastructure, as we plant development around the transit centers, we must think about this so that we don't further expose our people or our natural resources to the impact of climate change. So planning the transit hubs or transport hubs must be in cognizance of this fact that the way we design our transport hubs should be more environmental friendly rather than creating more challenge. For example, either in terms of creating a situation where we have more of green gas emissions rather than reducing, because we are told that since 1990, we have had over 50% increase in the amount of CO2 emission. And that's why we're having so many issues around health, around skin, different dimensions of skin problems connected with transport, green gas, greenhouse gas emission. And of course, issues of heat waves have been very common with us here in Lagos, and because of increasing temperature and the rest of it. So we need to look at all of this holistically, so that as we are trying to solve challenges of urbanization through various infrastructure planning, urban development design, and all of that, we must do that in the context of the SDGs, which specifically looking at how to make our world more inclusive, more safe, and more resilient and sustainable. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Peter Elias, for your presentation. You've been able to weave the connections between transit-oriented development and the SDGs and urbanization. And of course, you narrow down to SDG 1, which is eradication of poverty, SDG 8, which is decent work and economic growth, SDG 11, which is sustainable cities and communities, and lastly, SDG 13, which talks about climate change action. These are well linked and well discussed, well presented. So I want to once again ask our participants to kindly reserve their questions for him till the end of all the presentations. And of course, we have the opportunity of sending our questions by chat. So at this time, I want to welcome the last presenter who will be talking to us on TOD best practices and case studies. And this will be presented by Dr. Desmond Amegbebo, the current Director of Bus Services, Lamata. Dr. Desmond, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone present. I want to share my screen. Please, can you disable telling me that the host need to disable the screen sharing? Can you please? The engineer, can you please allow me
to
share
share your
screen?
screen. You can share your screen, sir.
Okay, okay, sir, allow me, okay. Okay, are we seeing it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll be talking briefly on the transit-oriented development, best practices, and case studies. Basically, the concentration of this presentation will focus on looking at the overview, we'll look at the case studies, and then we'll look at a few best practices that will enable transit-oriented development to achieve its goal. I know that much has been spoken about TOD, but let me also that it just focus primarily on developing activities around public transport stations. And when we look at such definition, it has to anchor on good urban design. It has to anchor on mixed land uses, and also have to create an appealing public transport station in a limited area. The TOD approach has helped many cities reduce their carbon footprint, so it has the advantage of reducing carbon emission because of concentration, allowing pedestrianization to areas of transport hub. Now, we want to say that TOD principles cannot be applied uniformly across the city because each city has different characteristics, different network, different configuration. I will speak briefly on I will speak briefly on Lagos, what we have done on TOD, even though the engineer has spoken, but there's a particular area that Lamata has worked on, which I will need to express as we move on. Now, why do we talk about TOD? Significantly, it helps in the following areas, both economic, social, environmental, advantages are derived when you talk about TOD. We're talking about highlighting transportation alternatives and increasing transit ridership. We are talking about taking advantage of non-peak direction transit capacity. We're talking about decreasing auto dependency and exhaust emission because the movement are transit-based. We are talking about using service land efficiently to help create a more compact urban form. And like the last presenter said, we are talking about creating, empowering people, reducing poverty, because at the TOD stations, with development of activities, shop, recreation, and what have you, you're going to be empowering people economically around such transport stations. But we are talking about providing, making better connection between jobs and housing. We're talking about acting as a catalyst for development around, in the city. So there are so many reasons why TOD should gain the attention of policymakers, gain the attention of government of any city. Now, when we talk about that, we now look at case studies. Before I go to foreign case studies like Maryland, like Aberdeen, which we are going to talk about, but let me talk about our own case here, which is National Theatre. You are aware that we are taking the blue line from Okokomaiko to Marina, even though we are concentrating on the first phase, which is my 2 to Marina. Now, what we are doing in National Theatre is to develop activities where you have shops, where you have various commercial orientations that will attract people naturally to that station. Now we are taking the bus service from Coste, that is from Weibo, via Coste to National Theatre. We have a National Theatre, you've been having an intermodal transport system with activities around National Theatre, encouraging and inducing people to make trips to National Theatre. So that is one of the case studies that is very important in our local setting. One of the things we have also done in Lagos State is to develop economic activity centers. We have about 27 economic activity centers in Lagos State, and government is progressively or will progressively pursue the development of connection, transport connection to those economic activity centers to ensure that there are commercial activities that bring people to those areas. So in Lagos, there are certain policies driving TOD in our transport initiatives and development. Now, we just look at 2 case studies. One is Maryland and the other one is Aberdeen. Now you can see that, I don't know, can you take off this slides a little, because I want to show something here. Because you can see that over here, you have activity center here, you have activity center here, then you have activity center there. Now what this does is that we are taking the Green Line corridor, provides connection from this place to this place and then down to where you have the hub station. So in that case, people at movement are channeled and attracted to this hub station where you have economic activities, mixed activities, employment activities, commercial activities. And number one, it is not just about congestion reduction, which is also part of it, but it is also beneficial to the operator because he tackles without such a mixed economic activities wouldn't have been naturally generated to such hub, station hub. So it has benefit both to the operators, to the developers, and to the transit regulatory authority. Now, when you look at another case again in the UK, it is also, it follows the same principle, but with different configuration. The TOD concept were guided by the following goal for a development in our city. We're talking about being a workable, workable TOD, accessible, convenient, reinforcing a small town character, bringing added value, bringing about a sense of place, creating a sense, a safe place, and providing green space for recreation. Now, I want to quickly talk about the best practices. Now, when you talk about TOD has to follow a master plan. It is not just about developing hub stations. Like the last speaker said, we are not solving a problem to create problem. It has to do with a master plan. And this master plan has to look at critical areas that affect the city and upon which TOD will be developed. So number one is planning. When we are talking about TOD, we need to do planning. We need to look at the land characteristics. We need to look at how do we channel the travel pattern. We need to look at the transport type, because we are talking about mixed transport mode, but which among all the modes, which transport type will best be suitable to such an environment? Which transport type will be suitable so that the operator is not running at a loss, neither is the development a wide elephant that will not be, that will not generate any benefit. So there has to be a great connection between the transport type, and the type of mixed development that is being talked about in such an environment. Then you have to also do like appropriate land use. What use do you want to put that environment into? You need to look, for example, if you are building a TOD, and then, for example, we are talking about National Theatre. This is just an example, kind of an example sake. Go and build National Theatre. What you bring there is sales of different things that people will not be attracted to. Of course, it's not going to. So you need appropriate land use. What use do you want to put land in that hub station into? It will be things that will attract people. It will be things that will induce people to make some trade. Now, you also talk about development review. When you are building TOD, there are a whole lot of review that will require to make sure that such TOD is worthwhile. The next slide we talk about, the next slide is just to show us the various, when you are talking about planning, they are talking about pedestrian connections, they are talking about good urban design, they are talking about accommodate the vehicle side like I mentioned earlier. Then when you finish with it, when we are done with it, we now look at the appropriate land use which ensure transit support uses, discourage non-transit support uses, encourage a mix of uses, locate the uses as close to the either LRT station or PRT station as possible. Then you now look at finally the development review. You need to review existing development plans so that when you are doing we are building TOD, it is not in conflict with existing development. You must be able to tie this together so that there's no conflict in implementation. You need a grid-based street pattern of the upper multiple access to this station. And then you also need to establish guidelines for interim development that will maintain long-term development goal. And of course, this is where I will say I will end my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Desmond, for your presentation. You've been able to give us best practices of TOD, and of course, you alluded to case studies of Maryland and that of Aberdeen. I want to now, at this time, welcome questions from the floor. Could you please raise your hand? If you are interested in asking a question, could you please raise your hand? Meanwhile, I will want to take the questions that had already been asked earlier through chats. So the first question asked on this platform was raised by Dr. Lawansin from University of Lagos. And the question is directed to Engineer Toriola, the first speaker who represented the Honorable Commissioner for Transport in Lagos. The question Dr. Lawansin asked has to do with the nature of engagement with the public. The Lagos State government is putting in place good transportation plans and trying to ensure that mobility is enhanced. But then she's saying, what is the nature of engagement by the government with the people? That is, the people and the professional bodies, because plan has to be bottom up if we want it to be effective, rather than top down, which is often counterproductive. That is the first question. Then the second question, directed to Engineer Toriola by Dr. Lawansin, is that, yes, beyond the provision of infrastructure, what are the safety and security measures put in place to ensure that people are able to walk and cycle in Lagos? Over to you, Engineer Toriola.
Thank you, Dr. Alalade. I want to appreciate Alade. I want to appreciate the Dr. Mrs. Lawansi for those questions. We have been engaging, there is a program we have been doing, Town and Gown, in which we engage our professional bodies to be able to look at the situation of things, and they have been acting as our consultants. I know Dr. Professor Oni, Dr. Lalade, as well as Dr. Lalade there again. We have been engaging a lot of professional bodies, even Nigeria Society of Engineers and Town Planning Association, a lot of all these professional, the government has been engaging them to be able to solve this problem together. Like I said, the government cannot do it alone. We need to look at the professionals, the professional body to look into the problem and consult with them so that some of these solutions, some of these problems can be solved by all of us, because we are all citizens, we are all stakeholders in the development of infrastructures in Lagos State. And two, walking and cycling, just like, you see, the way we are looking at, we are designing our road now, we are trying to ensure that we increase there's going to be a level difference between the road and the walkway, so that if anything will happen, the pedestrian will be able to, we secure their safety. And on security, we have, Lagos State government has invested heavily in security. And before you drive for like maybe 5 kilometers or 2 kilometers, you see our policemen well positioned at different locations. These are some of the structures the government has put in place to protect the walking, and also to encourage walking and cycling, and also in time of being harassed by area boys or by unwanted people like armed robbers and everything. So government has looked at a lot of measures. They have put a lot of measures in place to be able to protect all citizens, either walking or cycling in the state.
Thank you very much, Engineer Toriola. I appreciate your response, and but then we also need to take it beyond planning from your own end to engaging with the ministry, other ministries concerned with physical development, particularly the Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development in Lagos. We need to see a very strong synergy between Ministry of Transport and Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development in Lagos, because physical planning is undertaking a lot of development plans, activities, projects in Lagos, and we cannot really see a very strong input from Ministry of Transport, providing for mobility that will enhance people to enhance people's walkability and cycling is good. But then to what extent is the plans being put in place by physical planning ministry taking information from Ministry of Transport to ensure that our development plans are compliant with the vision and intent of the Ministry of Transport? Please, we also need to look at this. The second question came from Dr. Adejumo, an associate professor from Department of Architecture at the University of Lagos. He's saying, given the need to invest in infrastructure, his concern is about the drainage system in Lagos. That shall we continue to operate the open drainage system in Lagos because it is not good for the road architecture. So he's asking you, Engineer Toriola, what is your take, or what is the take of government as far as the drainage network system and system in Lagos is concerned? Engineer Toriola.
Okay, thank you. The Ministry of Transportation has been working with Ministry of Environment, Office of Drainage Services. And what we have been doing with them is to ensure that we also maximize the space on time of right of way. Like we need to go away with the open drainage system so that that system can be a covered one, which we can also use for walking. And the ministry has been giving a lot of advice to the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources to also make sure that we have a covered drainage so that we can also use it, because we are talking about space management here, which is also part of it. Like I said, the land is, we have a constraint in terms of with respect to the land issue in Lagos State. So every space we have to maximize it. So we have been working with Ministry of Drainage, Office of Drainage, to look into these, and which they have assured us that they are going to continue to improve their drainage design and drainage system in Lagos State, right from the, but we are only talking about the tertiary one, but the primary drainage can still have to be open, but the tertiary one and secondary can still be covered, which we are working with them, Ministry of Environment and Water Resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Engineer Toriola, for your response. The next question on this platform came from Dr. Mrs. Basirat Oyalowo of Estate Management Department, University of Lagos, and a very strong resource person at the Center for Housing and Sustainable Development. She's directing a question to Dr. Elias, who presented his talk on TOD, SDG, and urbanization. She's saying, given the situation in Lagos, where we have a high number of pedestrians and street traders, how can we deal with this conflict? I mean, I'm just paraphrasing a question. How can we deal with this conflict, given the fact that street traders are seen as very, very important, making livelihood that government is unable to provide for them, and then need for people to move on the road where pedestrian facilities are not clearly defined? How can such a conflict between the street traders and the pedestrians be dealt with in a city like Lagos? Engineer Tamplana, Dr. Elias, over to you.
I thought you had turned me into an engineer. All right, that's a good question. And perhaps I also wrote a similar question, but for my colleague from the Ministry of of Transport, on how do you integrate the informal transport sector, who we are told constitutes over 70% of urban public transport in Lagos. Just like Dr. Basira has mentioned, the informal economy, be it housing, be it transportation, be it trading and all that, cannot be relegated to the background if we must achieve the goal of the UN Sustainable Development of leaving no one behind. So I think what should be done is that, like Dr. Desmond mentioned, we must have a very holistic development plan, which incorporates all sectors of the economy. If we have over 70% of the urban population involved in informal economy, then you should give them their own fair share of the urban space, because all of this is about contested spaces. So, but if from the onset, the planning, design, the planning, conceptualization, all of those things take cognizance of all the sectors who play one role or the other in the urban space, I think the issue of conflict will be resolved. And of course, good stakeholders engagement, which have been alluded to previously. So through the number one, good development design planning. Number two, urban design that take care of various sectors, and of course, all of this happening on top of engagement with all critical and relevant stakeholders, so that we'll be able to make sure everybody is included in our efforts to address urbanization challenges. Whether it is pedestrianization or street trading or informal transport sector, all of this play an important role. So there must be a deliberate process of integrating everyone so that we can achieve a safe, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. The next comment, specifically, and not directed to anybody in particular, came from Tamplana Fakonda from Lagos State Polytechnic. He's saying, given the lockdown as a result of COVID-19, where people have reduced their daily travel significantly and even walking, he's saying that there is need for us to make provisions for people to walk in the absence of automobile movement, and that there is need for professionals, especially in the built environment and the engineers, to work together to redesign our road system and make more provisions for walking and cycling, so as to have a very good response to COVID-19. That is the opinion and suggestion from Tamplana Fakunda from Lagos State Polytechnic.
Dr. Please, Dr. Lahansin is wanting to ask a question here.
Okay, so Dr. Lahansin, over to you. I can see your hand up.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a very interesting conversation so far, but I just want to draw a quick attention to, something that is very important when we are doing TOD, and whether, there is need for us to reflect a bit more in light specifically with what Dr. Elias said about inclusive development. There are these zones, corridors of exclusion, we may say, whereby the introduction of road infrastructure, while opening up a community or access to a community on the map, is actually doing the opposite in people's lives. Take, for example, the BRT corridor along Ikorodu. There are many communities who used to have access between themselves, who no longer have because of the BRT. There are many bus stops, there are many BRT bus stops, but there are many communities that have to spend more to be able to access, the larger Lagos, because the BRT lane has effectively closed them away. So they have to take a bus or a bike to the next community before they are able to get transport. So it's a case of seeing development happening, but the development now being counterproductive to your livelihood. BRT, I will say, is a is a good manifestation of transit-oriented development. But what about the unintended consequences? I don't know which of the speakers can respond to that, but I just want to throw it out there. How do we plan for these unintended consequences, particularly when it's vulnerable communities that are even made more vulnerable? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lawansin, for your question. I don't know who want to respond to your question between Dr. Elias and Dr. Desmond, but I do know that when projects like that are about to take place, there's what we call environmental and social impact assessment. And one thing I have noticed is that when it comes to government projects, government tries as much as possible to look away from doing the needful. If there had been environmental and social impact assessment for BRT corridor development and other major key transportation projects of Lagos, this unanticipated consequence that you have just mentioned could have been anticipated and actions taken to mitigate that effect. So I will want either Dr. Desmond or Dr. Elias to respond to your question. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lande. I think you have laid the foundation for this conversation. When we are doing studies or doing design, and we carry out impact assessments, be it social, environmental, I think what we must do is that immediately we should set up institutions or identify institutions or structures that will enforce the full implementation of the recommendations in some of these studies. Because I have participated in a number of studies for Lagos, and sometimes when I see the state of the city, I wonder, where are all these recommendations? Where are all these initiatives, action plans that have been recommended in those studies? And it's not just a recent phenomenon. So like Dr. Lawson mentioned, definitely the impact assessments will have identified such challenges and provide likely solutions. But the question is, who is implementing? Who is coordinating the implementation? Who is monitoring the impact and all that? So I think that is where, and I'm happy government people are on this call. So we should do more in the area of implementation and enforcement. Thank you. I think Dr. Desmond can also help us here.
Okay,
Okay, thank you,
Dr. Desmond.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm happy to respond to that question with a case study. What I want to say is not an abstract. Let's take the case of the BRT development from Mile 12 to Ikorodu, for example. We carried out a lot of studies on that corridor, and we identify a lot of community roads, community access roads. Now, what is basically clear is you need to understand how do you marry safety with the livelihood of the people. One of the key reasons why the BRT on the Ikorodu Road is on the media is because of that. Because we know that if the BRT is to be by the side of the road, which is a bilateral, that is going to create a huge safety challenge, because people want to enter the community road, they want to veer off, and the bus is coming, and then there's going to be a huge challenge. So that's okay. The best thing to do is to put it at the media. If you also look at the BRT from Oshodi to Abulegba currently, that is almost being completed or that be completed, we will say that it's also at the media. There's a justification for that. So it is not altogether that communities or people whom the project is meant for are not taken into consideration. I will not say they are taken into consideration holistically, considering the various projects that have been developed in Lagos State, but I will say there's a significant consideration of these people, because these two cases I've cited, they are proven cases where ordinarily, I know that when we're to build a BRT on Ikorodu Road, we had to go to the then governor for justification. Why do you want to take this BRT to the media? Why not decide? We had to look at all the safety consideration that, look, if you take this BRT lane to the side of the road, the safety challenge to those people living in the community is going to be very, very huge. Now, besides that, why do we have overhead pedestrian bridges in those places? It becomes from the consideration of the community. If we are not taking them into consideration, of course, it costs government money. Each bridge, if we tell you, or we mention the cost per each bridge, and we're talking about almost 14 bridges from Ikorodu to Mile 12, it is a huge significance. So, also, when projects are being funded by the World Bank, you cannot look away from such consideration. There is no way the World Bank will support a project that does not take into account some of these things I've just mentioned. And yet, safety is paramount. And therefore, it is important we build all this together. I'm not shying away from the fact that there could be some projects, in some places that this consideration were not met. And that is not what I'm pushing for. But I'm not saying for these projects that are cool, that we serve a whole lot of communities on that road, and then we know that taking them into consideration is paramount. So, and subsequent development that we are building about eight priority corridors, all these are consideration we have done. We are carrying out some studies. We are looking at how do we make sure that these things are taken into account while implementing this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Desmond, for your response. I think that we learn by experience, or we learn from experience. The Ikorodu Road BRT corridor was the first one done by Lagos State. And after that, beyond Ketu-Ojota towards Ikorodu, put the BRT lane in the middle, and that of Oshodi Abule-Egba is also in the middle. And I can tell you that in terms of inclusiveness, in terms of safety and security, those corridors that are lanes that are in the middle of the road perform better than that of the ones that are pushed to the edge of the road. But then before I let you go, I want to ask you this question. When we develop rail corridor or BRT corridor, government is creating value, all right? And I have not seen clearly whether the government is ready to capture the value created. And I think that the TOD is one of the best ways of capturing the value created by the government. But I cannot really see any TOD taking place in Lagos because TOD essentially is high density mixed use development that is walkable, that is cyclable. And I have not seen any such development along the corridor. I know the government has plans, but then it is not very clear, like Dr. Lawanson said earlier, to what extent is government engaging with the people and the professionals to ensure that these plans are accelerated and implemented and are able to give us the expected consequences. Could you please answer that, Dr. Desmond?
Thank you very much. Let me say this. We look at the rail project, for example. When I was talking, I did mention during the section of my presentation, I did mention that TOD cannot be uniform in developing in the various cities and countries all over the world. The way TOD are conceived and developed in a particular urban environment could be different from the way it is conceived and developed in another environment. But the principles might be the same, but in terms of the characteristics, the existing factors that influence design, that influence development, we must bear that in mind. And I said that I made mention of national theater. Another be difficult for you to see now, but is the development that will be taking place in Okokomaiko. We are taking the rail project to Okokomaiko. That's why I said that we are building from my 2 rather, to National Theatre, to Marina as the first phase. And we are taking this now. I mean, when the first phase is completed, it is meant to be taken to Okokomaiko. Now, there are a lot of activities that are being developed around that area to incorporate the mixed land use activities that require. We are building the depot. That is where you'll be maintaining train, and then we are going to have stations, and of course, those are going to attract a lot of commercial value. They're going to attract a lot of. I can tell you that in Okokomaiko today, or towards Badagry, in anticipation of what is the government is doing and is what the government properties are being appreciated, and properties are appreciating gradually. So we can say that you are very correct from what you have said, but you may not be able to capture, you may not be able to know some of these things, you will not be able to highlight them as it were, but as we progress, move on to implementation, and we are engaging the grassroots, the people at the grassroots level, in terms of development, in terms of property that will be affected, what is government compensation, how are you going to do? Those are those are some of the things we do in our project implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Desmond. I have a participant in the house raising his hand, Stephen Oladayiye. Could you please give us your question?
Okay. Good afternoon, all, and thank you for the discussion so far. My question and observation has to do with the reality or otherwise of transit-oriented considerations.
Please, who are you directing your question to? Please, who are you directing your question to?
I'm directing my question to Dr. Desmond, actually.
Okay.
I want to cite examples to not just to counter what he has said, but to buttress what Dr. Lawanson said. I live on this side of Lagos, where what our experience is that we transit a lot and spend a lot of man hours on the main roads, and oftentimes we don't have reasons to be on the main road. The roads that should be connecting the communities, the localities, the neighborhoods, number one, have in many instances not been completed. So if I want to get from Shangotedo to Awoyaya, for instance, I have to get on the main road, the express road, and it's needless. Meanwhile, the planning people have made abundant provision on either side of that road for the community road. These community roads have not been developed. They are not being developed. So the communities are not connected. So what you find is that most of the time, a lot of traffic, needless traffic on the main road. People who should be on that road and people shouldn't be. People who are going to VI or going to Ekpe, who should have exclusive use of that road by the virtue of the distance they are traveling. Or people who are going from one neighborhood to the next neighborhood who cannot find connectivity. This lack of interconnectivity amongst contiguous communities that border the highway, for me, it undermines the concept of transiting. We cannot easily move from one locality to another locality to get little things done. We have to get on the main road. I wish the planners and the Ministry of Transport will look at this on this corridor and in other corridors. I can cite, for instance, from the road going from Aja to VI, from Aja to Ekpe, from Aja to Badore, and all these roads. You find that community transiting, inter-neighborhood transiting is seriously not enhanced. The inner roads that we should be able to use to connect ourselves are not existing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen Oladayiye, for your comments, your observation, well presented. At this point, I have looked at the participant list and no hand is up, and we need to bring this program to a close. I would like to call on Professor Oduwaye for his last comment before I invite Dr. Victor Onifade, the cluster manager, to give us a closing remark. Professor Oduwaye, over to you.
Yeah,
sir.
first I want to make probably a contribution or comment. You know, what is happening so far is that we have not really not started adopting this concept deliberately in Lagos. You know, about 4 years now, when Dr. Dumbaku started a PhD, we ended up that he should study all the central business districts, because we knew Lagos was getting matured enough for deliberate studying of those districts. And somehow, this is what we are talking about, that even the existing new plans, they just plan those areas, but we don't really have deliberate efforts of adopting these concepts in planning those areas as TUD centers. So this is something that we can take home, so that deliberately Lamata, Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development can actually do their further research and identify such areas, so that we now have a planning approval order that will be specific to each one, so that we can take maximum advantage of those locations. Because those locations, they are locations where we have infrastructures, the best of roads, water supply, electricity, and yet we are not really maximizing them. So that's on one point. I noticed that we have eminent personalities attending this meeting, and I would like to recognize them. We are really appreciate their presence. The second National Vice President of Nigerian Institute of Town Planners, Town Planner Nathaniel Atebija, is in the house. Thank you very much, sir. Our own guru, Town Planner Ayodele Adedilutu, is in the house. Professor Felix Omoli from Futa Akure, my friend at the Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development, Town Planner Shulola, is in the house. Taufik Salau is in the house. Then Town Planner Bayo Fakbonda from Lagos State Polytechnic. My friend Chulu from Ibadan Polytechnic. Town Planner Kola Lawal. Alade Olubukola. I think Dr. Alade can give us details about who is that person. Thank you very much. I think the.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much, Professor Duaye. I think Professor Nwokoro is also in the house.
Professor Nwokoro is in the house, yes.
Town Planner Adediran is also in the house. With fellow of the Institute of Town Planning. Professor Michael Adebamo, our own dean, is also in the house. So, yes, our dean, sir. Just a word for us before we round up. Professor Michael Adebamo.
Prof, sir, you can unmute yourself.
Professor Adebamo, over to you, sir.
Yes, I'm trying to unmute myself. I'm not sure whether you can hear me.
We can hear you, sir.
Oh, thank you so much. We want to thank all our participants, particularly resource, persons, Dr. Elias, who had, actually given us a very impactful, lecture, and for all the contributions too. I believe sincerely that, and when all these able to send this out, especially for the policy makers, and good enough, we also have some of them with us, those who are also in government, because I see that we talk more also of the implementation, that most of these things actually, based on our research work, our assessment reports that have been done in one way or the other. But when it comes to implementation, we begin to see that where exactly are all these recommendations, that we have in our reports. But I'm sure with time and the right people being in the right places, we'll really get there. So I really want to appreciate everyone for this wonderful session, this great program, which I know will have a lot of impact, on our environment, especially on TOD. And as we move forward, I want to say a big thank you on behalf of the Vice Chancellor and the faculty, University of Lagos, Faculty of Environmental Sciences, University of Lagos. I really want to thank our cluster manager, thank Professor Duaye, Dr. Alade, and everyone for this great program. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Adebamo.
Sorry, I think I can see Head of Department of Geography, Lagos State University too. Thank you very much, Dr. Akota.
Okay, Prof. At this point in time, we want to round up the program. And to do that for us is no other person than the cluster manager in person of Dr. Victor Onifade. Dr. Onifade, the floor is open to you for your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. The moderator on behalf of the Sustainable Cities and
Will you please readjust so that we can hear you well? Dr. Onifade, we can't hear you well.
This network is bad.
Dr. Onifade, we can't hear you well. Could you please readjust and retake your closing remark, please?
I'll be. Yeah. Okay. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you well.
Hello, sir.
We can hear you well.
Okay. Okay. On behalf of the cluster leader, that's Professor Oleku Duaye, We want to appreciate all participants, starting from our panelist, Dr. Desmond, the representative of the Commissioner for Transport, Engineer Turiola, Dr. Peter Elias. I want to thank our fellow, we appreciate your robust contributions to the thematic issues. And we know that we will implement it in our report and submit it for appropriate authority. And also want to appreciate the finding of Professor T.G. Nubi and the co-director, Dr. Lawansin, and the center manager, Dr. Basirat Olayo. We so much appreciate you, Professor Dr. Every other person that participated in this discussion. We thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Done.